The text on the invitation was embossed in gold. My mother had always loved expensive things she didn't earn. I ran my thumb over the raised lettering at my kitchen table in my one-bedroom apartment in Queens. The one I let my family believe was all I could afford after my art career failed. The invitation read, "Please join us in celebrating Whitley's appointment as Senior Vice President of Goldwater Sterling Capital, black tie. Saturday, December 24th, 7 p.m. The Hadley Estate, Greenwich." My sister had been promoted. Of course she had. And, of course, my mother had decided the celebration would happen on Christmas Eve, the one night a year families are supposed to gather without an agenda. There was an agenda. There was always an agenda when it came to me. I'd been sent the invitation by certified mail, not a text, not a phone call, a certified letter, like a court summons, because my mother believed in what she called ceremony and what I called performance. She wanted me to feel the weight of being included. She wanted me to feel grateful. Have you ever been treated like a charity case by the people whose job was to love you? I poured myself a cup of coffee from the dented French press I kept on the counter for show. The apartment was small and the furniture was deliberately cheap. Thrifted lamps, a futon I'd had since college, paint-spattered tarps draped over a corner like I was still working on a canvas. It was a set. I was the actress. I'd been playing this role for almost 9 years. My name is Sutton Marchand. I'm 31 years old, and the family that raised me has no idea that I am the founder and majority owner of Marchand Reef Holdings, a private equity firm based in Manhattan that, as of last quarter, manages $2.4 billion in assets across commercial real estate, healthcare logistics, and a small but lucrative portfolio of regional grocery chains in the Midwest. They think I sell bad watercolors at street fairs in Brooklyn. The lie started when I was 22. I just graduated from NYU with a finance degree my parents paid for grudgingly, after years of them telling me that I should have gone to a real school, meaning Wharton, like my sister. I'd taken a job at a small fund downtown and made my first real money on a hunch about a struggling pharmacy chain in Ohio. By 25, I had partners. By 27, I had my first 100 million. By 30, I had a corner office on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown, and a name that, in certain rooms, made people sit up straighter. But my family never knew any of that, because when I was 23, fresh off my first real bonus, I'd come home to my parents' house in Connecticut for Thanksgiving with a brand new Hermes scarf my best friend had given me. My mother had looked at it, looked at me, and said, in front of everyone at the table, "Oh, Sutton, you didn't steal this, did you?" She laughed. My father laughed. My sister laughed. My uncle laughed. I sat there with mashed potatoes on my plate and felt something inside me click off like a lamp. So the next Christmas, I showed up in old jeans and a Goodwill sweater. I told them my art thing wasn't going anywhere. I let my mother pat my hand and slip me $200 in cash. I went home and put the money in a shoebox in my closet. I never spent it. I just wanted to see how long this could go on. It's been almost a decade. And what I learned is that they didn't want me to succeed. They needed me to be the cautionary tale. The one who didn't listen. The one who tried to be different and failed. Without me at the bottom, my sister couldn't be at the top. So, when the invitation came, I knew exactly what it was. It was a stage. Whitley was going to receive her crown, and I was going to be the peasant kneeling at her feet. My mother had probably already rehearsed the line about how proud she was of her real businesswoman. My father had probably already poured the bourbon. I should have thrown the invitation away. I should have spent Christmas Eve eating Chinese food in my real apartment, the penthouse on West 67th that I'd bought for cash 3 years ago. I should have called my partner, Reeve, and gone to her place in the Hamptons like I did most years. But 6 months ago, something had changed. 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased the Hadley estate. Not the house my parents owned, no. The house they rented. Because my mother and father, for all their performance of old money and refinement, were not actually wealthy. They had a name and a zip code and a country club membership. What they did not have was equity. They had been leasing the property at 14 Burnt Mill Lane for 18 years from a holding company that had eventually defaulted and gone up for sale. I bought it through a shell entity. I'd kept the lease in place. I'd been their landlord for 193 days, and they had no idea. I hadn't decided yet what to do with that information. I hadn't planned to do anything. I'd bought the property because the land was worth more than what the seller was asking, and because, if I'm honest, there had been a small, dark satisfaction in owning the floor my mother walked on every morning. But now there was an invitation, and now there was an agenda, and I had a feeling, the way you feel a storm before it breaks, that something was coming. I called the car service that Friday morning and told them to pick me up at my real apartment, then dropped me 3 blocks from my fake one in Queens. I changed in the lobby of a Holiday Inn into a clearance rack sweater dress from Macy's and scuffed black flats. I put my hair up with a cheap claw clip. I checked my reflection in the elevator mirror and saw, looking back at me, the girl my family wanted me to be. Small. Defeated. Apologetic. I drove my old Honda up to Greenwich. The Hadley estate, as my mother insisted on calling it, was lit up like a movie set when I pulled in. Strands of warm white lights wrapped every column of the front portico. A valet in a red vest stepped forward and gave my dented Civic the kind of look reserved for raccoons in the trash. I handed him the keys and walked up the steps, holding a Tupperware of grocery store cookies. The front door was opened by my Aunt Beatrice, my mother's older sister, who took one look at me and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you came." Like I was a stray. The foyer smelled like cedar and expensive perfume. A string quartet was playing in the next room. I could see my sister, Whitley, in a champagne-colored Oscar de la Renta gown I recognized from a recent runway show, laughing with a man I assumed was her new boss. My mother stood in the middle of the parlor like a queen receiving subjects. My father was at the bar. Sutton. My mother spotted me. Her smile arrived a half-second after the word, which was how I knew it was forced. "You made it." "Hi, Mom." She air-kissed me on both cheeks. I could smell the Chardonnay on her breath. She held me at arm's length and looked me up and down, and I watched her face register everything she'd hoped to find. The chipped manicure. The drugstore lipstick. The cookies in my hand. "Oh, honey," she said, "you didn't need to bring anything." I wanted to. "That's so sweet. Diana, can you take these to the kitchen?" She handed the Tupperware off to a hired server without looking at her. "Now come in, come in. Everyone wants to see you." Everyone did not want to see me. Everyone wanted to see me, which is a different thing. They wanted to look at me and feel better about their own lives. My cousin Marin, an attorney at a midtown firm, found me first and asked, in a tone of practiced concern, how my art was going. I told her it was hard. She nodded and said the economy was tough on creatives. Her husband, a hedge fund analyst, asked if I'd consider teaching. I said I'd thought about it. He gave me the name of a nonprofit that placed unemployed adults in school systems. I wrote it down on a napkin to be polite. Whitley found me near the fireplace. "You came." She wrapped me in a hug that lasted exactly long enough for the photographer to capture it. "I wasn't sure you would. I wouldn't miss your big night." She pulled back and held my hands. "Sutton, listen, I've been thinking. Goldwater has an opening in their administrative support team. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Health insurance, $40K to start. I could put in a word. You just have to be presentable, which," her eyes flicked to my dress, "we could work on." "That's so kind, Whitley. I just hate seeing you struggle." "I know. And you can't keep relying on Mom and Dad forever. They've been so generous. I'd never taken $1 from them. Not since I was 22. I'd actually been paying their property taxes for the last 3 years. They were an anonymous LLC because I quietly noticed they were behind and didn't want my mother to lose her dinner parties. They had never asked where the relief came from. They had simply assumed they were owed it. "You're right," I said. "I'll think about it." Whitley smiled the smile of someone who had just confirmed her place in the universe. She kissed me on the cheek and floated off to receive her next compliment. Dinner was served at 8:30. The dining room had been done up with white roses and gold candlesticks. Whitley sat at the head of the table next to my father. My mother sat at the other end. I was placed, deliberately I'm sure, between my cousin Marin and a great aunt who was deaf in one ear. My father stood up around 9 and tapped his glass. "Tonight," he said, "is about family, and about what family looks like when it works." His eyes swept the table. "When I look at my older daughter, Whitley, I see the result of every value your mother and I tried to instill. Discipline, ambition, grace, under pressure. Whitley, you have made us proud beyond words." The room applauded. Whitley pretended to dab her eyes. "And," my father continued, "we are blessed as a family to have come through hard times together. Not every child finds their footing the way Whitley has. Some of us take longer. Some of us never quite arrive. But love." His eyes landed on me briefly, and I felt the room tilt. "Love is patient. Love is kind. Love makes room at the table, even for those who haven't earned their seat." There it was. My mother lifted her glass. "To Whitley." "To Whitley," the room echoed. I lifted mine. I drank. I did not flinch. And then, just as dessert was being served, my mother stood up. "Before we continue," she said, "I have a small announcement of my own. As many of you know, the Hadley estate has been in our family for almost 2 decades. It has hosted every holiday, every milestone, every birthday." She paused for effect. "And tonight, your father and I are thrilled to announce that we are gifting this house to Whitley and her fiancé Preston as an early wedding present." The room exploded. Whitley shrieked. Preston, who I had not even properly met, stood up and shook my father's hand. Cameras came out. My mother was already crying with the satisfaction of a woman who has timed her own moment perfectly. I sat very still. I sat very still because I owned the house. I had owned the house since June. My parents did not own this house. They had never owned this house. They had never owned this house. They were leaseholders. They were tenants. And they were about to gift my own property to my sister. My mother turned to me with shining eyes. "Sutton, sweetheart, I know this might be hard to hear, but we want you to understand. The house wasn't going to be a fair inheritance to split. Whitley and Preston are starting their family. They have plans. You're still finding yourself. And that's okay. We'll always have a guest room here for you. As long as you want one." The room waited for me to cry. I'd like to say that what I did next was planned, that I'd been holding on to this card for months, waiting for the perfect moment. But the truth is, I had not. The truth is that something in me, the part that had been kneeling in a costume for almost 10 years, simply stood up. "Mom?" "Yes, honey. Can I borrow you and Dad for a moment?" "In the foyer?" She frowned. "Right now. Right now." There was a flicker of something in her face. She covered it with a laugh. "Sutton, this isn't really the time it is." "Actually." My father set down his bourbon. He could hear something in my voice. I watched him register it. He'd been a salesman before he retired, and he had good instincts about leverage. He stood up. 5 minutes, he told the room. Family business? I led them into the foyer. Whitley followed, of course, because Whitley always followed. I waited for the door to close behind us. "I need to clarify something," I said. "Because what you just announced isn't possible." My mother's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. You don't own this house." She actually laughed. "Sutton, I don't know what you think you're doing. You've been leasing it for 18 years from a holding company called Crestbrook Trust. Crestbrook defaulted on its own obligations in 2024. The property went into a quiet sale. It was purchased in June by a private LLC called West 67th Holdings. You've been paying rent to West 67th Holdings ever since. You have, I'm sure, a copy of your most recent lease renewal in the safe in Dad's office." My father's face had gone gray. "That's not possible," my mother said. "It is possible. It's a matter of public record. The deed transfer was filed with the Greenwich town clerk on June 19th. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "I can show you the filing right now, if you'd like." She didn't answer. "You don't own this house," I said again. "You cannot gift it to anyone. You especially cannot gift it to your daughter at a Christmas Eve dinner in front of 40 guests." Whitley laughed. A sharp, nervous laugh. "Mom, what is she talking about?" My mother turned to my father. Robert, tell her she's confused." But my father had not moved. He was looking at me the way you look at a poker player who has just laid down a hand you didn't see coming. "Sutton," he said carefully, "how do you know about West 67th Holdings?" I let the silence stretch. "Because I own it." My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I bought this house 6 months ago, Mom. The land, the structure, the carriage house, the pool. I'm your landlord. I have been your landlord for 193 days. I let that settle. And I'm also the person who's been paying your property tax shortfalls for the last 3 years. The tax relief program your accountant told you about? That's me." "There's no program. There's just me." My mother's knees went. My father caught her elbow. "This is a joke," she whispered. "Sutton, tell me this is a joke. I have something else to show you." I reached into my coat pocket. I brought it with me in case. I had not been sure I would use it. I told myself, driving up the Mara Parkway, that I would decide in the moment what kind of daughter I was going to be tonight. I unfolded the document and laid it on the foyer table. "This is a 30-day notice to vacate. It's been signed and dated. Under the terms of your lease, I'm allowed to terminate with 30 days notice for any material misrepresentation to a third party regarding the property. Announcing the sale or gift of a leased property to a wedding guest in front of witnesses qualifies." "You can't do this," my mother said. "You can't, or your family." I looked at her. "Mom, you just stood in front of 40 people and said I hadn't earned my seat at the table. I didn't. You did." Sutton, sweetheart. And you've been saying it, in one form or another, since I was 19 years old. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every Sunday phone call. You have built an entire identity around being a generous mother who is patient with her disappointing daughter. And tonight, you decided to make that public. You decided to gift my property to my sister, because you assumed I would sit there and let you. I didn't know it was your property. That's somehow worse. Whitley made a strangled sound. Wait, what does this mean? Are you saying you have money? I turned to her. Whitley, I run a private equity firm. I founded it. I own the controlling stake. We closed our 5th fund last year at $1.2 billion. My personal net worth, as of our most recent audit, is roughly $2.4 billion. The apartment I told you I rented in Queens is a stage set. I own a penthouse on the Upper West Side. I sit on 3 boards. I have been on the cover of Institutional Investor twice. You have never asked what I actually do for a living because you decided when I was 23 that I was a failure, and that knowing the truth would have ruined the story you wanted to tell about yourself. Whitley's face did something I had never seen before. It crumpled, but not with sadness. With math. I watched her run the calculations. I watched her realize in real time that the sister she had patronized for a decade had been letting her do it. You lied to us? She whispered. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. That's the same thing. It really isn't. Then she did something I didn't expect. She took 2 steps backward, toward the dining room door. Her face hardened. You did this on purpose. You came here tonight to humiliate us. I came here tonight, I said, because Mom sent me a certified letter, and because some part of me wanted to see if you'd find a new way to break my heart. You did. She turned and pushed through the door back into the party. I could hear through the closed door the room go quiet, then start to murmur. I could imagine Whitley telling them something, some version of events, some new lie. My mother was crying now. Real tears. Mascara was running. Sutton, baby. Please. Let's just sit down and talk about this. As a family. You used the word family 3 times tonight. Once when you said Whitley represented our values, once when you announced you were giving her my house, and once right now asking me to forget both of those things. I don't think you know what that word means. I love you. I believe you think you do. My father, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke. What do you want, Sutton? He said it the way a businessman says it, and I almost respected him for it. He was the first person in the family, in maybe my entire life, to ask me a direct question and wait for a direct answer. I want 30 days, I said. You have 30 days to vacate. I'll cover your moving expenses up to $50,000. I'll pay 6 months of rent on a comparable property elsewhere. After that, you're on your own. I'm not punishing you. I'm just no longer subsidizing you. And Whitley? Whitley is an adult. She makes $740,000 a year, plus bonus. She does not need this house. He nodded once. He understood the math. But my mother could not stop. After everything we've done for you, Mom. After everything we've sacrificed, Mom. She stopped. You did not sacrifice for me. You sacrificed Mom. She stopped. You did not sacrifice for me. You sacrificed me. There's a difference. And I have spent 10 years letting you do it because I was too scared of what it would feel like to stop. I am not scared anymore. I walked past her, back into the dining room. The party had not yet fully understood what was happening, but they could feel it. The string quartet had stopped playing. The waiters were holding trays they'd forgotten to set down. Whitley was at the head of the table, her champagne-colored dress no longer luminous, and Preston, sweet stupid Preston, had his hand on her back and was whispering something to her. I picked up my coat from the chair. I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration, I said to the room. There's been a mix-up about the property. The house is not my parents' to give. Whitley, I wish you the best at Goldwater. Truly. Congratulations on the promotion. Preston, it was a pleasure to almost meet you. I walked out. The valet brought my Civic back around. I drove down the long gravel driveway with my hands steady on the wheel, and I did not cry until I hit the I-95 on-ramp. Then I cried for about 4 minutes. Then I stopped. I called my partner, Reeve, from the car. She picked up on the second ring. How bad, she said. Bad, I served them the notice. Oh, honey. I know, are you okay? I will be. Come to the Hamptons. I have a guest room and I have wine. I'll be there in 2 hours. I drove east through the dark with the heat on high and the radio low. Somewhere around Bridgeport, I started laughing. I don't know why. Maybe because for the first time in a decade, I was driving a car I owned to a friend who loved me, away from a family I had finally stopped auditioning for. Maybe because the costume was off and the apartment in Queens was empty, and the lease was up on the girl I had been pretending to be. In the weeks that followed, 3 things happened. My mother called me 27 times. I let it go to voicemail every time. On the 28th call, she finally said something into the recording that wasn't a demand or a manipulation. She said, "I'm sorry, Sutton. I don't know how to fix this, but I'm sorry. I saved that voicemail." I haven't called her back yet. I might. I haven't decided. My father wrote me a letter. An actual handwritten letter on his old monogram stationery. He wrote that he had not known, that he should have known, and that he was the one who had taught my mother to read me as small because he had been afraid of how big I was getting. He said he would not ask for forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that he saw it now. And Whitley did the thing I was most afraid of, and the thing that made the rest of it worth it. 3 weeks after the dinner, a reporter from a financial publication called me for comment on a story they were running. It turned out that Goldwater Sterling Capital had been quietly investigating my sister for unauthorized fund movements that had been flagged in an internal audit 2 months before her promotion. The promotion had been a way to keep her in the building while the investigation continued. The reporter was calling me because, as the founder of a competing firm, I was on the short list of executives Goldwater's board might consult about reputational containment. I declined to comment. I declined gracefully and professionally. I declined as a woman who understood that you do not need to push someone who is already falling. The story broke on January 14th. My sister was placed on administrative leave the same day. Preston, sweet, stupid Preston, broke off the engagement 3 weeks later. My parents moved out of the Hadley estate on the 29th day of their 30-day notice. I had the locks changed on the 30th. I haven't decided what to do with the house yet. I might sell it, I might keep it and let it sit. I might donate it to a women's shelter, which is the option I keep coming back to in the quiet moments when I think about the girl I was at 19, sitting at that table with mashed potatoes on her plate, hearing her mother laugh at the idea that she could have earned something on her own. People keep asking me if I feel guilty. I don't. I feel many things. I feel tired. I feel relieved. I feel, sometimes, a strange grief for the family I was supposed to have. The one where my mother would have hugged me when I told her about my first 100 million, where my father would have asked me to teach him about the market, where my sister would have called me when she got into trouble at work instead of trying to bury me underneath her ambition. I grieve for those people. They never existed, but I grieve them anyway. But guilty? No. Here's what I learned, and what I want you to hear. Whoever you are, sitting wherever you are, watching this on whatever screen you found it on. Your family does not get to decide what your worth is. They will try. Some of them will try their whole lives. They will tell you, in 1,000 small ways, that the role you were assigned at 13 or 16 or 19 is the role you must play forever, and that to step out of it is to betray them. It is not betrayal. It is becoming. I spent almost 10 years pretending to be smaller than I was so the people who were supposed to love me could feel comfortable. I will not spend another day doing it. If you've been pretending for someone, for anyone, your parents, your siblings, your husband, your boss, stop. Stop tonight. The room will get quiet. People will be angry. Someone will cry. And when the noise dies down, you will still be standing. And you will be, for maybe the first time in a long time, the actual size of yourself. That's the only revenge that ever mattered to me. I drove east that Christmas Eve in a car that wasn't a prop to a friend who knew my real name, and I've never once gone back. I think about that Christmas Eve a lot now. Not the part where I laid the eviction notice on the foyer table. Not the part where my mother's knees buckled. I think about the part before all of it, when I was 23 years old, standing in my parents' dining room in a Hermes scarf, listening to my mother ask if I had stolen it. That was the moment. Everything that happened 9 years later was already set in motion. She didn't know it. I didn't know it. But cause and effect don't ask for our permission. A small cruelty repeated for a decade becomes a debt. And debts get called in. What I want anyone watching this to understand is that I didn't win because I had money. Money is a tool. It's a hammer. A hammer doesn't build a house, and a hammer doesn't tear one down. The person holding it does. I won, if you can even call it winning. Because I had spent 10 years quietly becoming someone my family could not imagine. They were busy writing my story for me. While they were writing, I was living a different one. That's the part I want you to hear. Not the revenge. The years before the revenge. The years where I worked at a desk at 6 a.m, where I read prospectuses on the subway, where I made mistakes that cost me real money and I learned from every single one of them. My sister Whitley assumed the universe owed her a promotion. I assumed the universe owed her promotion. I assumed the universe owed me nothing. Guess which one of us was prepared for what came next? If you are in a family right now that has decided who you are, and you know in your gut that they are wrong, listen to me carefully. Do not argue with them. Do not try to convince them. Words are cheap and they have already stopped hearing you. Just go and become the person you actually are, quietly, without an audience. Build something, learn something, save something. Whatever your version of that is, the day will come when the gap between who they think you are and who you actually are gets so wide the truth simply walks into the room and sits down at the table. When that day comes, you will not need to perform. You will not need to shout. You will simply need to tell the truth, calmly, while standing in your own shoes. The room will rearrange itself around that truth because reality always wins in the end. I am not angry at my mother anymore. I am not even angry at Whitley, wherever she is now. I look at them the way you look at people who got the math wrong on a problem they were sure they had solved. They bet against me. The bet did not pay. That is all. Become the size of yourself. Quietly. Patiently. With your whole heart. And then, when the room finally goes quiet, stand up.